Welcome to Coffee and the Bull.
Hey guys, welcome to Coffee and the Bull. It's going to be Mike and John. I want to say thank y'all for taking a moment out of your day. Before we get too far into this and tell you what we're going to be talking about today, Sir John has a message for everybody.
I do, and this has actually been something that's brought up a couple of times. If you catch me coughing or whatever, or if you've seen the last previous episodes, me hacking up a lung or everything, I found out recently that I have pneumonia. So, guys, go to the doctor. Like, not rocket science. I know we all think the same thing, that we're invincible, we're going to take over-the-counter medicine, we're going to be just fine.
To be fair, he whined about it long enough.
I did. I cried a lot. 6 weeks, I just was downing, like, shots at the bar of just...
not the real bar.
Not a real bar, but of cough medicine, just trying to suppress it, thinking, I just got the crap the kids brought home from school. Lo and behold, I had pneumonia, and it put me in the hospital. So... Go to the doctor. The doctor, when I got there, I don't keep track. I hadn't been to the doctor in 5 years. Go to the doctor, guys. Stop playing with your health. Because when you're laying in a hospital bed struggling to breathe, thinking to yourself, this is the end, and my kids are going to grow up without dad, go to the doctor. It's not that hard. Go to the damn doctor. That's all.
Okay. So since he's done whining and complaining,
such a jerk.
We're
no compassion.
We're going to start off today with, today our episode is going to be greater than time and a half. And for a lot of guys, that phrase is a big deal. Time and a half. It's when you've done your 40 hours worth of work and now it's time to log that extra time. Catch that overtime, and that's what unfortunately, a lot of guys. That's their Christmas fun. That's some of them even that's their eating fun because whether it be child support or bills or just whatever's hanging in the balance, that overtime is what carries them away to the next paycheck.
And look, I know we didn't do it. Mike's usually the one that throws this out there, but the disclaimer to this video is going to be number one. We're not saying screw your job. We're not saying screw your family. We're not saying any of that. We're simply saying that when you put in that extra effort at work, you got to remember to have a balance and put in that extra effort at home.
Right.
Time and a half at work is worth time and a half at home. So find that balance that if you're putting time and a half in at work, you need to put time and a half in at home. And that's kind of the road we're going down today to make that balance.
So before I was super rudely interrupted.
That was not rude.
It's overtime is going to be something that a lot of guys
I'm
deal
feeling
with,
froggy tonight. I want you to know that. I'm feeling froggy tonight.
Yeah.
Like it's going to be interesting.
It's one of the things where it's a common thing. Everybody does it. Whether you want to or not. You got people who are on salary. They work more than their maybe contracted hours or whatever. Hourly workers are always doing it. I think every job I've ever had has had some form of on-call list or mandatory overtime at certain peak seasons, things like that.
Holidays and whatnot.
And there's two. We're going to approach this from several different angles. And unfortunately, we're not on one team or the other. We understand a lot of it from different standpoints. I was a business owner at one point, so I understood. Hey, sometimes it sucks, and you've got to log the time. As much as I want to be at home with the family, I've got to take it. I've got to get this job done. Because you don't get the job done, you don't get paid, which means employees don't get paid.
Yep. And on the supervisor side of it, we understand that need for the accomplishment of the task or the mission or whatever. So we understand where the supervisor comes from with the, hey, look, I need every Tom, Dick, and Sally here at work because if I don't get this done, my boss is mad. And if my boss is mad, we all know that shit rolls downhill.
Right.
And it could be we're all working Saturday now.
Right. And so what you run into is you have a lot of guys who they log day after day after day after day. Especially in South Louisiana, a lot of guys work in the plants and the refineries, and it's not uncommon for them to work 6 12-hour shifts a week,
easy,
or more. And I know whenever I was doing some boiler making work, that's what we were doing is we would chase small turnarounds. And you would easily 10, 15, 12-hour shifts in a row. Or whatever the OSHA limit is, we'd hit it and you'd take a rest day, and then you'd be right back at it.
Yeah.
And it's fine for about a week and a half, and then about week, the second week is when you're a potato by the end of it.
Fatigue,
like you've got
dying,
you're not thinking straight. You're struggling with things that normally you wouldn't struggle with. Whether it be pulling measurements or on what materials you get all the way to where you need to be and you forgot a tool, so you got to come back down off the scaffolding and go, and so it slows everything down. But
because your mental game's not there.
Right, your mental game's not there, and we all when you've done it, you talk to other guys who've done it. They're like, oh yeah, you're going to be tired, this and that, but yet we still do it.
Right.
And the issue is we're chasing that overtime, and sometimes it's not mandatory. Sometimes hey, you're not being called in. You're not behind on your bills and things like that. It's just hey, you're choosing to do it because it's like chasing paper or hitting the grind or whatever it is.
That's like what we talked about earlier. And okay, that time was rude. I kind of cut you off.
Every time.
I had a job working for this company. I worked there almost 3 years, and we talked about it. There was one point I worked for 3 straight months, 12-hour shifts every day. At the end of that year, that's right. Pour your coffee.
Yeah,
at the end of that year, I had worked more overtime as an individual than anyone else in that entire company, and I went to the supervisor and was like, hey, I have shown you that I'm dedicated. I'm here. I've sacrificed countless hours to provide and accomplish our mission. I'm looking at hopefully a pay raise or maybe move to a different task area, or even just a promotion in pay rate. You know, and I was basically told that I wasn't valuable enough, and that was my realization that I have just poured a year's worth of heart and soul into not just being present, but actually productive in my presence. I'm not just coming in, collecting my paycheck, and going home. And I just got spit in the face. And that drove me to leave that company and go to another company because I felt like I wasn't appreciated. And so that's kind of where we're at in this struggle is some of us do it because we're trying to show that we're dedicated to the job and we're trying to be the best employee that we can be. We want to be here. We're loyal. And some of us do it like you were just talking about, chasing the paper because you don't need it.
Hey, you're trying to build the dollars in the bank account.
Right. And get yourself in a better standpoint.
It's a valuable goal, but what you run into is you're sacrificing your home life.
Exactly.
And there's it's unfortunately a dad's worth is valued in the sacrifice. It's nothing is ever not a sacrifice. Either you're going to stay at home and you're not getting the money to go in the bank account, so you got to figure that out, or you go to work to put the money in the bank account and you're sacrificing time at home.
Right.
There is no in between.
And look, the downfall of that, and we've discussed it before as far as our dads and presents and things like that. And I don't mean like Christmas present. I mean their presence in your life. And it made me think about earlier that the greatest moment that I have now as a dad and understanding was my dad only made it to one baseball game my entire high school professional career, however you word that nowadays. But I know that he took off work early just to make it there.
Right.
But in reality, as a kid, I didn't want to really put everything into the sport because Dad's not coming. He doesn't care. I don't care.
Right.
Not bagging my dad. I love that man to death, and I know why he worked as hard as he did and why he worked as much as he did. But that's what we're talking about is you're putting in that sacrifice of time and a half at work. You're not putting that time and a half in with your kid and showing him that work's not the most important thing to me. The work is just to feed you, clothe you, put this roof over your head, and ask any man, especially older men, ask them, what was your primary function as a dad or role in your home?
They were a provider.
Right, I provide. I put and my dad used to say it to me growing up all the time. You got food in your belly, you got clothes on your back, you got a roof over your head, I've done my job.
Right.
That's not our job. That's the realization that we have got to start having is that's not your job. That's a part of your job. That's tasks that you have. Your job is to be there for that child in more ways than just the bank account.
Right.
And that's a stressor that I can't put enough in this is Mike and I both have worked time and a half at jobs trying to bring in that paper to make home life more comfortable because we believed we could get to a point that we could sit back and relax a little bit. We've got enough in the bank to cover bills and we can do a little extra. And the reality is I can't think of one time that something didn't happen, say, selling a house or selling a vehicle or, got a bang up job that was easier than we thought it would be. So we got paid more because we thought it was, whatever that case was, and we got those extra funds. Not one time in my life, and at 39 years old, at no point in my life outside of those extenuating circumstances can I say that work provided me enough to sit down and be comfortable. And I sacrifice so much with.
You talk about when you say work didn't provide enough for you to be comfortable. You talk about in your normal pay, or are you talking about with,
Yeah, normal pay. Like
okay.
going
Right, you had
in-
to do some type of
right,
extra.
had to do
Right.
the extra to get the bills paid, and I'll be fair, I've lived paycheck to paycheck before. Even in the military, that was not enough money
Right.
to just survive on. It was enough to have my bad habit of smoking or Red Bulls
Mm-hmm.
or whatever. But the reality is the extra that we put in isn't always enough to cover it, and so you're sacrificing those moments with those children.
Right.
And like my son, we just had the worst field trip I've ever been on in my life. Whoever's idea was elementary kids in a high school auditorium watching a high school reenactment of The Little Mermaid. Stop. You are fired from ever making field trip plans. But the fact that I showed up, that's all that kid cared about.
Right.
He didn't care. We could have been, I don't know anything worse than that, honestly.
I can tell you. So it just so happens a couple episodes back,
Right.
we were complaining about having to go to a pumpkin patch.
Right.
So this past Friday, the weather canceled my son's field trip to the local pumpkin patch.
Right.
And they're moving it to Monday. So originally Brittany was
After
going to go.
Halloween.
So now I get to go. Now I'm going to a pumpkin patch on Monday morning, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go, man.
Why are you still
But-
going? Halloween's
but
over.
They're trying to get something for the kids, so it's like, I get it, but it's one of the things where I'm not going to like it at all.
No,
like I
no.
know I'm not, especially it's just I think God's got a sense of humor where he's
Right,
like, hey,
right.
I heard your
I heard you.
episode.
I watched.
and
I watched.
and you're gonna go to a pumpkin patch this year, Mike. So, but no, it's being present in their life is what makes it, or in what they've got going on, because they're excited
Yeah.
about. You remember when you were a kid, you were excited about field trips and the
Right.
baseball games and everything else. And you didn't care that, hey, Dad had extra $100 in the bank account
Right.
to go buy something, something or whatever. And so,
And they don't understand when you're at the grocery store and they're like, Daddy, can we get candy? Daddy, can we? And you're like,
Right.
no.
right,
Like, I'm trying to make the electric bill. What
Right,
are you talking
right.
about? No, and I'm right there with you. Like, it's the moment, and we don't think about it now as adults. But so growing up, my dad, he's a veteran. But when I was growing up in the world, because he got out when I was fairly young, he became a long haul truck driver and eventually settled as a trash man. That was his stick, and he makes banging money being the trash man. Trashman out there, hey, kudos to you, because I couldn't do what you do. But I remember as a young kid going to school, and of the few occasions my dad would show up, that's the happiest, proudest moment as a kid when
Right.
Daddy walks in that door. And, my father, he's, in my eyes, a 6'9", 380-pound man that the world couldn't crush if they tried. Obviously he's probably not that big, but that was my power move as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, my dad could beat up your dad. Do you see the size of this dude? And I know that when I show up for my son, that's he's like, no, this is my daddy. My daddy's a police. My daddy, look at him. He's scary.
Right.
He's
I don't
awesome.
think the profession matters to the kid.
It
They're
doesn't.
just-
It
they're
does
just
not
excited.
at all.
Because I remember whenever I was doing construction, my son loved, playing with the excavator, playing with
Oh,
the
yeah,
skid
the
steer.
excavator. That's all that kid ever talked
everything,
about.
He enjoyed. He'd be right up there in the cab with me doing
Right.
whatever we were doing, and he didn't care what it is. Now he's excited. It's
Right.
because he's. I think they see the fulfillment that you've got in your job. When
Right.
you come home and you're like, because you're always excited about your job. That's just how
Yeah,
it is.
yeah. Even if you hate it, there's still
Well,
something
I
you
remember
talk about.
my first job out of high school, I installed sprinkler systems in people, like irrigation systems
In
in people's
Louisiana?
yards in Louisiana. Believe it or not, well, you got these subdivisions, and you're
You're
gonna
right,
spend
right.
20-30 grand on sod.
Right.
You want
You
want
want
to
it
take
to
care
grow
of it.
right,
So,
yeah.
So I would go and I'd install those, and it turned into, man, every time we'd walk into a restaurant or a store or whatever, like I'm pointing out all the things wrong with that sprinkler
Right,
system,
right.
as if she cares.
Yeah.
She does. She's like, whatever. It's a pipe in the ground. Come on,
Right,
man, water comes
right.
out of it. But it's no matter what the job task is, you always take pride in your work.
Yeah.
Every guy is, in his own mind, is the perfect. He's a perfect example
yeah,
of how that
yeah.
job should be done.
This
You
job
know?
would fail without me.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it causes a driving force for us to go make that overtime, and because hey, we want the job to look good, or the completed project needs,
Right.
it needs to be finished up. And so you got all these guys who they'll go log day after day after day after day after overtime of overtime. And what it forms is, if we can dive into this aspect of it just a little bit, and then we'll circle back around, is it forms that idea of, the work hard, play hard, or your weekend warrior type things where, hey, I worked all day, all week long, worked hard, you left everything on the grindstone. We get you're tired. But what happens is you're like, hey, let's go, spend all weekend, out on the lake or whatever. So you go buy a boat. Well, you bought a boat, but you forgot your truck's not big enough to haul the boat, so you got to go get in a bigger truck, and then you got to get,
or your camper,
and so you get all these guys who go get all these toys, whether it be four wheelers or side by sides, and they all serve a purpose. Don't get me wrong,
right?
I'm not faulting anybody for having a boat or having a camper. I've had a camper, I've had side by sides, I've got four wheeler, or I had four wheeler, so I get that lifestyle, but especially in today's world. Our grandparents didn't have all that, and the reason they didn't have all that is because they never bought anything that they couldn't afford.
Exactly, and it was all done on cash. If I didn't have cash, I didn't need it.
Right, and so what you run into now is, you don't look at, hey, that truck is going to cost $65,000. Hey, well, what's the note on it going to be?
Right, insurance and everything else that's going to tack on.
Everything gets financed, and so you get all these guys who now. Hey, you started off where you're making overtime to make a little extra, and so, hey, let me go have some enjoyment in life, and you went and bought all these toys. Well, all these toys come with their own bills and their own maintenance. Congratulations, you spent $40,000 on a boat, but when something breaks on it, and I know if you've never owned a boat, they never break. But if you own a boat, they always break.
Right.
And it's you become very familiar with how to fix it. And
not everybody's got a, hey John, my side by side doesn't work. Can you come hit this with a hammer?
Right. Where do I hit it with a hammer? But it's one of the things where all these toys break. I remember me and my wife bought a camper, and we didn't buy it as a recreational thing. We bought it.
Right.
We were going to live in it for a little while our house was selling, so we didn't have to constantly
get in there,
take
clean
the dogs
it,
in and out,
doing all that.
We set it, stage it, and be done. And I remember, man, we were living in this camper, and it was storming outside. And the wonderful thing about being in a camper, and when it's storming outside, is it's not storming inside the house.
Right.
Well, the issue with my wife, because I don't know if she's ADD or maybe some other mental illness going on.
I did
something
not
else
say
going
that you
on.
had a mental illness.
But no, she knows. So she sees a spot that looks like it might be soft.
Right.
On the back wall of this camper, right? And most people would say, hey, it's thunderstorming. Let's leave it alone, because obviously if water's coming inside, there's something going on. No. She takes her whole hand and just pushes a hole through this wall. And on top of, one, it's a camper wall. They're not made for you to go.
I just pictured you going.
Look, whatever you picture is so much nicer than what happened in that camper. I'm letting you know now. And it was just one of the things where... Granted, it was a rotted spot. We bought a used camper. It was a rotted spot. It wasn't anything that we knew obviously before we moved into it. But it's like, I get there's a problem, but hey, maybe in the middle of the miniature hurricane we have going on outside, that's not the time.
We don't need to exacerbate
to create a hole in a little bit of water over there is fine. We'll take care of it whenever it finishes. But you have all these expenses come up, like with a camper, it's you get rotted spots, you got to fix the roof, you got to do, slide outs go out and all this other stuff. With boats, the motor burns up, you hit something, or whatever happens, and they all come with bills. And so now, where you were chasing overtime just to make ends or to buy the extra things, now you're doing it to make ends meet, because you got to pay that note. If you don't pay the note, your credit score is going to go down.
Yeah. And
now the bill collectors are calling, and the last place you want to be is ending a phone call with a bill collector as you're walking into the house to your wife who needs money to go get groceries. And it's it adds a lot of stress. And it started off with, hey, I'm going to go, let me go work a couple extra days of overtime, so then I can put the down payment on the boat or whatever it is. And it just goes downhill. And I think we are our worst enemy with that because we're not valuing, or we're not acknowledging the fact, hey, you spent that time and a half, or all those hours at work, and that time and a half away from your family now is going to cause a lot more stress, and it's going to cause more issues at home.
Well, and I think the reality of it is that we as men, we don't put the value in it. And what I mean by that is not a jab at dudes, okay? But as guys, we prioritize differently than what other people, other women, would prioritize it as. And what I mean by that is, and I think this is where that stick comes that men aren't nurturing.